My next guest is going to be fighting for some hardware this Saturday. He's going to be taking on Stephen New for the featherweight title. It is Jeromy Mitchell joining me here on the program. Jeromy, how are you, man?
Good. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I'm happy to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time, man. We're on the same page there, so that's a good start to this interview, man. First time we've had a chance to chat, man. Where did this journey start for you? How did you get involved in combat sports?
So I started when I was 12, so about 12 years ago, and I was just doing a bunch of stupid things that I shouldn't be doing, and I realized that if I was going to continue to do them, so instead of deciding not to do them, I decided if I was going to continue to do them, that I should know how to defend myself. And so I ended up going to an MMA gym and got started back then, but only with boxing. And then I kind of just progressed, and then, it became something I was interested in, and it became something that kept me away from doing stupid things. And so I've just continued ever since, and it's put me on the right path and brought me here.
It's one thing to train MMA and, get into it, or boxing in your case, and, just do it as sort of a side thing. But at what moment did you know this is something you wanted to pursue as a career?
So the first day I walked into the gym, I had actually told one of the instructors, I was like, man, I really like this. I would love to be a boxer one day. And he said something along the lines of like, I wouldn't get my hopes up. Most people don't compete, and those that do, most of them usually don't turn it into a career, which was a rough way to start. But I mean, looking back, seeing it's a hard thing to tell a 12-year-old, but I mean, it was absolutely accurate. So,
okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What about watching MMA? Was that something you did while you were training, or did that come after? Like, when did you become a fan of martial arts?
So I probably watched my first live MMA event, excluding one time I watched like an Anderson Silva fight, because I was always a fan, but I didn't really know anything about the sport when I was younger. So I remember I watched one, and it was the first one I ever watched, was him and Chris Weidman, the first fight. And then every time I watched Silva live, he would lose. So I stopped watching him, and every time I wouldn't watch, he would win. So I still feel like I have something going there, because I've never watched him live win. But other than that, I probably didn't watch my first MMA event until Rousey versus Holm.
Interesting.
And
okay.
I already had like 2 or 3 MMA fights myself before I actually sat down and watched my first ever MMA event.
What a card to watch too. That was crazy.
Yeah.
That the whole upset and everything, which is nuts. So peeping your Instagram, man, tell me a little bit about Clean Cut Killers. What's that all about?
So it was a brand that started off of my friend's Instagram. He made a post one time with the caption. It was just all of us had like some fights, and it was like Clean Cut Killers, and I was like, I'm going to use that. So I ended up turning it into a brand, because that's what I aspire to be. Like, Clean Cut Killer to me is essentially the guy that you would walk into a bar. He's real nice, put together, sitting there by himself, and he's the last guy that you would think to be as dangerous as he is.
Okay.
And he'd be the first guy if they were like, you have to fight somebody here, pick. He would be the first one you would pick, but little did you know he was a killer.
Dalton from Roadhouse. You know the movie Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze? I'm a little bit older than you. You might not get the reference, but do you know who I'm talking about?
I've watched it, but it was so long ago.
Okay,
it's
no
something
worries.
I definitely need to revisit. But that's essentially what Clean Cut Killers is to me. Right now, it's kind of stopped as like a shirt brand, but I would like to eventually move it into more than just that, into gear for combat sports, because I mean the gear that we have today is definitely not as good as it could be, or is compared to other sports. So I'd be interested in that, or supplements, because there's so many supplement companies that fighters get in trouble with dealing with their branding and things. Issues with whether it's clean or not. So I would love to be able to produce a clean supplement, more targeted towards MMA than powerlifting or anything like that.
Let's talk about your opponent here, Stephen New, 10-fight veteran. What do you know about him? How do you feel like you match up against him here?
Actually, the first time I watched Stephen fight, he fought my coach, and it was Stephen's pro debut. I was probably 14, and he had actually ended up winning first round rear naked choke. And as far as how I feel I match with him, I feel like I match very well. Possibly the worst match that he has ever had. Just for styles. Obviously, everything at this level, we're fighting for a professional title. We're both good fighters. We've been doing this for a long time. So I don't expect him to be a walkover, but I think as far as styles go, my style is going to make it to where I can walk over him. Because everything that he seems to like to do plays into what I do. And that, no better night for me than that.
And for people who don't know, where are you training right now? Who are some of your main training partners that are helping you get ready for the fight? Or I should say, who have helped you, because this fight's coming up this weekend.
So I train at Advantage Martial Arts in Princeton, West Virginia. We're in the middle of nowhere, but we are like top quality gym, high class training, and like I said, in the middle of nowhere. So it's like our town's best kept secret. As far as training partners, I always keep the same two: Derek Lambert, Brett Summers. I have tons of people that I get to work with daily, but those are my two most consistent teammates and coaches. So
awesome. That's good stuff. And I noticed, like, this is a featherweight fight, right? You fought at 135, so I imagine the cut's going well because you don't have to cut all that extra weight.
You would think. I mean, yeah, the cut has went great, but it's still as much of a real weight cut as it would be for anybody else to make the weight. When I had made 135, I had actually competed my first two pro fights at 145, and then I got the opportunity to fight for the Valor Bantamweight title, and I didn't want to miss it. And so I made the weight. I ended up getting myself down to, I think my last body scan, I was like 3.3% body fat.
Wow.
So for me, it was a cool experience to do. It's just definitely something I can't do time and time again. Plus, it depletes you to the point that I don't feel like you compete as well. So with that being said, it was kind of cool for me. Yeah, it was cool to win a title, a pro title, but it was especially one at a promotion like Valor that's kind of known. But it feels even better to know that I essentially, because you always hear about how bodybuilders get down to such a weak state, and even though they look good, they're not at their best. So it was cool to be able to say that I got down to what would most people deem my weakest state and still be able to win a professional title. So
gotcha. Like, how much, if you don't mind me asking, like, what do you walk around at? Like, how much weight do you have to cut normally to get down to even 45?
So I'm usually about 168.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and around like 11% body fat. And so I'm usually pretty big, pretty lean, but I'd spent a couple of months before that trying to see if I could make bantamweight. So I'd lowered my frame just enough. And then I started working with a nutritionist. She's absolutely fantastic, and she helped me make the weight. But once I continued to eat kind of the way that she had taught me to eat, obviously not as restricted in between camps, size just kept packing on to the point that I was actually supposed to defend my bantamweight title back in January, but it was like I just kept adding, and it was mass. It wasn't, fat mass. So it became to where I was just unable to defend my title, and I had to end up eventually moving to featherweight.
Okay. Well, at least you recognize that as opposed to trying to kill yourself to try and make that title fight, right? So kind of worked out well for you in that sense. Who's going to be in your corner for this fight?
Derek Lambert, Brett Summers, and then I have my jiu-jitsu coach, Kyle Davis.
How's this fight playing out on Friday? Or Saturday, I should
say. That's up to him. I see either first round, second round TKO or submission, but it won't leave the first two by any chance.
Now, if you get this win, there's a lot of implications here because 4-0 looks a lot better than 3-1, right? Especially for things like, Contender Series. Obviously, you got everything going on with Showcase MMA, but what's sort of the implications of a potential win here this weekend for you, in your opinion?
Honestly, at this point, I don't know what I would have to do to get the call to Contender Series if this wasn't it. Mm-hmm. For me, it's like my last opponent made me 3-0. It was for a title as well, so just as prestigious as this one, maybe even a more known title. Just because they've been around longer. With that, and they had shuffled a few people into the UFC that had previously held that title. Whereas I believe this will be Showcase's inaugural title.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and also too, I think what helps is you're fighting a guy who's got a great record, 7-3. Like that's almost a UFC record if you think about it to get you into the UFC. So I'm sure they're looking at that as well, and I'm sure that was part of the reason you took this fight as well. You're fighting a tough guy to kind of get you that battle tested experience before you do make that jump, right?
Yeah, and like you said, Steven, very impressive record, 7-3 on a 2-fight win streak. My previous opponent, 6-3 on a 4-fight win streak, all first-round finishes until we fought. And then, so it's kind of like I fought these fights, and I'm continuing to fight these hard fights, but it's like after going, 4-0, 2 pro titles, 24 years old, beat a 6-3, knocked him off a big win streak, beat a 7-3, knocked him off a big win streak. It's kind of like, what else would I have to do?
Right.
And if there is more work that has to be done before I can fight those guys in the UFC and get my shot, then that's what I'll do. I'll keep taking pro titles for ransom until they let me in. So,
okay. Before we wrap things up, we talked all things fighting. What about outside the cage hobbies? What do you like doing? Are you sports? Do you like any other sports? Do you like going hiking? Are you a Netflix guy? You like playing video games? Like, what do you like doing outside the cage when you're not training and beating people up?
I hang out with my family and I fight and I work, and that's it. As far as hobbies, interests, my life literally revolves around fighting.
Okay. So you're watching fights then, probably. You got a Fight Pass subscription and all that?
Yeah. If I'm not fighting, I'm not training. I'm watching fights. If I'm not watching fights, I'm in my head thinking about just different things. But it's literally 24/7. I'm either with family or dealing with fighting. And sometimes it kind of seems like they intertwine. I'm out, on the mat thinking about my family, or I'm out with my family thinking about the mat. So.
Good stuff, man. It is Showcase MMA 17 coming up here on Saturday. Jeromy, anyone you want to thank? Any sponsors? Any social media you want to plug? I'll give you the last word.
Man, we would be here 45 minutes if I went to thank everybody. So I'll just thank everybody at Advantage Martial Arts. Like I said, my teammates, my training partners, Brett Summers, Derek Lambert, Kyle Davis. Huge shout out to my wife, because without her dealing with how crazy I am, none of this would be possible, and I wouldn't even be here. As far as social media goes, you can follow me on pretty much anything at Jeromy Mitchell MMA.